You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
If there's one phrase that resonates within our industry that we've heard over the last few years is that C-store doesn't just stand for convenience store, it also stands for community store. And that really is going to be the focus of our guest today. How do you make your C-store the community store? Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And I am John Eichberger with the Fuels Institute and NACS.
And today we are joined by phone with Don Rhoads, who is president of the Convenience Group.
Welcome, Don. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, gentlemen. I'm excited to talk about our store chain and how we have evolved over the past almost 30 years. Yeah, you bet.
So one of the things is the name of your company is the Convenience Group, and you run the store names. They're semi-called Minit Mart, but you really have a little bit of a different twist that you apply to your store names. Can you kind of walk us through how you got to where you are now in terms of coming up with store names that really focus on the community more than anything else?
Sure, you bet. What I'd like to do is step back and let you absorb, I guess, some of my tenure. I was hired back in 1989 to actually pay off some debt for a smaller regional franchise that was owned and operated by a convenient food mart. And so I knew little about the industry, but had a pretty good idea that I could get the debt paid off. And we had 51 stores at the time, and you had 34 partners, all franchisees, who were running the franchise. So it's really an interesting dynamic. And so I learned the business really from the franchisee perspective. I ended up buying a store immediately, so I had a day job and then I worked at night. I would sit around a boardroom with a number of franchisees and listen to the day-to-day issues that would come up. And for me, over this 8 years where I worked for this group, I really did get the trial by fire by working the front line, and we all have stores, and they're in different communities, and every community is unique. And so I ended up buying the chain after running it for that period of time, and I immediately set out to reduce the number of stores. Some of them had already kind of cycled through their economic life, whether it be transportation issues or other, and then concentrate on those communities where we had an opportunity. And so the chain that we have today are stores that have been in these communities for many years, well-traveled, and we have brought the store image, the unique identity, back to the community. So when you hear La Centra Marketplace or Philida Market, Fruit Valley Village, these stores all represent the community in which they reside.
You know, your background is fascinating because from that beginning of your career, now you're on the NACS Board of Directors, you're on the Executive Committee of the National Association, and you're kind of viewing it from a more of a big picture strategic side. Can you kind of chat about how your experiences have helped you become kind of a leader of the industry to kind of help shape the future of where we're heading?
But yeah, and it's incredible that I am sitting, inside the four walls, I guess, of NACS looking out from the executive committee perspective. I'm surrounded by some very talented and diverse generational folks who either run large stores or smaller chains that they're all very intelligent, proactive, and I'm just blessed to be in that space. I think that for me, where I'm relevant is I'm a small operator, and again, I do not have a large administrative staff. We don't, if there's a compressor that blew at one of my stores, I'm going to know about it that day. I'm going to get a phone call. So for me, I represent, I think, a population of stores, members of NACS, who are becoming more important as we see consolidation going on with the larger chains, and in some respects that's worrisome for the industry, but I think in other respects it creates an opportunity. I see a lot of smaller operators adding stores, adding diversity, and I'm kind of in that space. We're working on initiatives today that I never thought would be, part of our game plan. But as the industry's evolved, and it's evolved quickly, we've had to be, proactive with our decision-making process. So I think I've been given I won't call it unique opportunity, but the opportunity to look at all facets of this industry, including owning my own store, and then working through a little bit of the evolution of where this industry is going. And I feel that I've again been placed in NACS space and our state association and other representative groups to help move that needle.
So your origin story, at first, I thought it was a movie plot. When you first talked about like how
34 partners, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. And just just one man paying off a debt. But somewhere along the way, you decided that this was more than just a gig. This was your career. This was what you wanted to do. There are many businesses in our industry that are second generation, third generation, fourth generation, you name it. What are some of the pros and cons of being relatively new to the industry? Does that allow you to see things a little differently, or does it take a little longer to figure out how something works because you may not know who to go to? Or what are the pros and cons along the way?
Sure. Well, obviously, you're a little naive walking into this arena without having, a supporting cast. Although I think it gave me a really interesting perspective of the industry, and as I look back, if I would have had guardrails moving forward from day one, it probably wouldn't look like the same model that we have today. And for our chain, I think that's a good thing. I really do. I mean, we get back to talking about unique identity, a community-driven model. For me, that was the franchise back in the 80s. I joined in '89, and these stores were all part of the fabric of their community, and so we, without knowing a lot about the industry, it gave me the ability to come in with at the time a fresh perspective. There's a lot of banter that happens between franchisors and franchisees. I heard it all. And when you have a franchise group running the franchise again, it's a really, really interesting process. So I think, if you look at my education, and as long as I've been in this industry, having that background really helped develop where we're at today.
And I think it kind of characterizes what, you and Jeff started talking about in terms of the community focus. And I was reading some things from a conversation you and Jeff had prior about your focus on developing the stores and the products and services you offer and the look and feel. And then Jeff mentioned the naming nomenclature. Within that scenario, I mean, you're really focused on your immediate repeat customers. It's not like a chain that's trying to set up predictability at every stop along an interstate. So it's much more locally central. And that kind of model, I don't think would really exist well on an interstate, but within those communities, it's got to be a gold mine for your neighbors.
Yeah, so the great observation. I mean, again, these stores have been around for many years. They're well-traveled. We have evolved as the communities have evolved. I'll give you one specific project, and it's called Fruit Valley Village. And Fruit Valley Village is today a 12,000 square foot retail services development and solely dedicated to the Fruit Valley community. All right, so we took a 2,800 square foot store, added around 1,500 square feet. We have Lighthouse Credit Union. We have the Resource Housing Center. We have a food pantry. I've built a teaching kitchen for the community. These are all resources that are provided to help the low, moderate income population in an area where we have a commitment to help move these folks into the mainstream, and it's been a crazy success for us. The store has it's a superette now, where we're moving back into that superette model where you see a lot of fruits and vegetables, fresh foods. We still remain probably the largest craft beer and wine retailer, small format retailer in Washington State. But if you were to walk into that store, you'd be impressed by what we've done and how it just articulates the community. I'm really proud of it, as you can tell.
The old model was, John and I know, you stand by the side of the road with a clicker and you count cars going by. And if there's enough cars going by, it's a great place to have a store. Now, it's gotten a lot more sophisticated. You look at census data, you look at all this data to collect and define the right target audience that you want for each neighborhood. Now, Fruit Valley sounds a little bit different in that your opportunity was both to, I assume, be profitable as a business, but also raise the community. So how can both of those objectives coexist in a business? Because it's a little bit unusual.
Well, it sounds to me a little bit, we've had this discussion within the industry for a long time. Do we lead with our head or our heart? And the model you just described, Jeff, the economic model, is head. And it sounds to me like, Don, you're kind of leading with your heart and serving your neighbors and your communities the way they want to be served. And then the head part comes in with it to make it profitable. But it seems to be a complete reversed approach that, it's something that we're lacking in society these days, of leading with that compassion, that heart a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you. And that's right. We obviously use our store as an anchor. That store has been there since 1968, and there has been a store there since the early 30s. Okay, so this is a well-traveled location, but it's in a neighborhood, and and it's in a neighborhood where historically it has been underserved with many amenities that we're trying to introduce, but the store's the anchor, and the synergy comes from the tenants. And we could have a salon or a gym or whatever, but this was something that was really important for us, and you can say it's giving back, but more importantly, it does create a lot of synergy, and it's exciting to see. We get calls all the time over this specific development because of the unique nature of what it's doing for the community. So for us, it's working. And by the way, I'm in business to make money like everyone else, but I'm also in business to understand that we're there for one reason and one reason only, and that's because of our communities. And if we're not relevant, it's going to be really tough to keep this model moving in the right direction.
And it's that type of attitude that is so important when we're talking to other communities or trying to open the door for convenience stores to enter a neighborhood, that the negative perception that some people have about this industry, when it really comes down to it, even the chains, they're trying to serve their communities. And, Don, you're doing it way over the top in terms of your commitment to it and how clearly articulated your commitment to the community is. But pretty much every store goes into a community going, we want to serve the population. Now, there's different levels of it, but we got to break through that perception that they're just profiteers. They're just in to make money. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about people. That's just completely opposite of the reality of those involved in this industry.
Yes. So I served on our state association board for almost 20 years. I was president. In fact, I moved in after Hank left for 8 years, and I can tell you,
Hank is the NACS CEO that used to live up in that area.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So the folks that are involved in this state association, I mean, there's a culture, and I could point to 20 different retailers and be confident in saying that they have the same values that I do. I mean, they really do understand how important it is to give back, and it might not just be the community. It might be other activities that we bring together as a group. But if you've got to give back, you really do, and you have to tell that story. It's one thing giving back, but it's another if you're not telling the story, because people aren't going to know unless there is some effort on your part to tell your story in a way where it's like, they get it, and we are so appreciative to have them, in our backyard.
Yeah, it is about storytelling. It's about telling your story over and over and over again, not just once, because if you tell it just once and somebody doesn't pay attention, then they missed out on a great story. So it's about repetition. We can have you on and talk all about, the process of getting involved in a community and going through all those steps. But is there one piece of advice that you might give for somebody to think about a non-traditional operation that is even more hyper-focused on the community than a traditional convenience store, one that is creating a whole space like you've created? What is the first step in that?
Well, I think the first step is to identify the need. We're in affluent communities. We're in the lower moderate income areas. You have to identify the need. All right, and I'm all about moving again the demographic needle. I think you can do that. I don't think that you have to say, well, I am going to sell this or that because that is my demographic. Your demographic is varied, but you need to understand what your core demographic looks like, and then work on evolving into a community neighborhood store that's serving. You're never going to get everyone, but the majority of the needs of those folks that live around you, and it's easy to do. Once you have the information to do it with, I don't think you're going to be able to walk into a community and say, "This is, I'm going to change your perception of who we are, what we are. I think that you're going to have to understand who you're dealing with. And I went through a horrible experience last week. I mean, I had a neighborhood meeting for a new store location, and we got hammered by the community. Why? Because a lot of them haven't lived there that long, and others just do not want to see development. And it was 2 hours, 140 people just throwing darts at me. But at the end of the day, we all shook hands, and we're going to try to work through this. But I'm not going to go in there and tell them what their needs are. You need to understand what the needs are. So for me, it's really getting into the peeling back the layers of where you're located and finding places where you can make a difference, and giving back. I don't care whether it's the food bank or working with nonprofits in other avenues. I just think that if you show folks that you're there and you're going to be a great asset, and not only by just selling things, but providing the conduit to give back. That's huge.
Yeah, I think so. I think that really gets into kind of the heart and soul of this industry. Now, not everybody articulates and everybody absorbs that, but I think on the vast majority of those who are engaged in the convenience industry, they care about that, and they really do want to resonate with their neighbors and their communities. And I think it's a unique feature of our industry that's not replicated in other retail formats, and I think it's something we need to capitalize on every chance we get.
So yes, we tell as many stories as we can on Convenience Matters podcasts about how you can do that. We have information on the NACS website about ways to tell your story. Don, thank you so much for telling your stories today. If I can leave our listeners with one piece of advice, put the name of the community before the name of your store, and then they'll act like it's part of their community. And of course, there's a lot of other steps to that process. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.